for the residents of Camp Liberty, that is the one issue here in Washington on which there is tremendous bipartisan support. It says a lot about the facts. This is an issue on which the facts are not in dispute. The residents of Camp Liberty deserve justice, and they have been denied justice. They have been made promises by multiple secretaries of state on both sides of the aisle, presidents from both sides of the aisle, across administrations, and those are promises that have not been kept. The Iraqi government has been complicit in the violence that's been visited upon Liberty. Not only have they been complicit, frankly, they claim they're not involved. It is inconceivable that inside Iraq, the level of violence that's been visited upon Liberty could have happened without the active involvement and complicity of the Iraqi government. What about the September 1st attack on Ashraf? Scores were killed, and then we hear, only recently, the Iraqi government acknowledges that in a secret burial site, it buried 51 individuals. It won't say where. And you have to ask yourself, well, why would that be? Why would it be a secret place? Why would they not reveal the location? Why would they have done it without notification prior to the burial? And one can only presume that was because they wanted to prevent autopsies, they wanted to prevent documentation of torture and murder. And again, but they can and they will, again, if the people in this room put pressure on the people who work in this building, and the United States Congress on a bipartisan basis puts pressure on the administration. The Congress needs to ask the State Department and the Secretary of State, why not? Why is it that we don't apply to the horrific conditions at Liberty, what happened at Ashraf, the international standards that we apply across the world don't seem to be applied to the Iraqi government? And what are their conditions? Well, over the last few months, Iraqi forces have not permitted septic tanks to be cleaned. They have not permitted food trucks to come in. And on many occasions, including immediately after attacks where people were injured and dying, the Iraqi medical clinic set up inside the camp, which referred those residents who were injured and dying and ill to the hospital outside the camp for treatment. Those people were stopped by Iraqi forces from getting the medical treatment they so desperately needed.
Iraqi troops entered Ashraf and assassinated 52 of these men and women, many of them with their hands tied behind their back, a couple of them on the hospital gurneys as they were going to get medical treatment for the injuries and wounds sustained during the attack. Oh, and by the way, 7 hostages taken, and all of a sudden nobody knows anything about where these men and women are, and 6 of the 7 are women. Remember, it's our government promised to keep them safe at Ashraf. Our government promised them they'd be safe and secure if they moved from Ashraf to Liberty. And our government asked some of its citizens to convince these good people to empty words, tragically flawed and broken promises, and no credibility left with my government and with my State Department. I take it personal. The rest of the world knows that we told Maliki, you've got to provide the safety and security. I'm hoping as much of the world knows is that they convinced several Americans to use their credibility and visibility to convince them to move Liberty. The rest of the world knows that they're living in a concentration camp. And the rest of the world knows that even Secretary of State Clinton promised that they'd be safe and secure. And if you don't keep its word to political refugees who have surrendered their means of self-defense to you, how much credibility do you have in the broader world community on other issues? So I think maybe we ought to just discontinue aid for a while. put a little pressure on him. I think we're going to negotiate with the Iranians. We ought to send them a signal that once we make a commitment, we keep it.
We put that promise in writing. The United States government, that's our government, which I grew up and I believe in, that we have the moral high ground. I saw us come off that high ground, and we're still off that high ground. And any of you question anything about the conditions they're under, ask this question of our own State Department. Show me a picture of Camp Liberty, current. Let me ask one of the news people from my area, Cleveland, Nebraska, to go in and just film Camp Liberty. I guarantee you, you will be denied. We have had our own U.S. congressmen and senators go over to Baghdad and be refused to even see the condition these people are under. Well, we set the conditions for a modern-day concentration camp, and that's where these people are to this day that many of you don't even know about. It's time we lived up to what we promised them in 2003, protection. I would be happy to talk to any of you offline. These are real people there. And I can't overemphasize, my forces commanded at Guantanamo Bay. I know the conditions those individuals are under. The conditions that these people are under that we promised protection are far worse. And we're responsible for that.
As this is a moral obligation, this is something we have to do. Don't wait for the courts. Don't wait for the White House. You are an independent branch of our government. You have the power to continue aid to Iraq on making them behave like civilized people toward this group of brave refugees. You have the power. You have the power to enforce a life and death contract that the United States government made with the residents of Camp Ashraf, that in exchange for their giving up their inherent right to defend themselves and their families, they gave up that right in exchange for a promise of protection. We have not protected them. Instead, we have exposed them to violence, to death, to injury. 52 murdered in cold blood, total of 116 killed, hundreds more wounded, 7 hostages taken, nearly 3,000 vulnerable to further attack.